Now, from water shortages to wildfires, the past 12 months have raised global awareness about the economic and human cost of extreme heat events. We've seen wildfires in places unprepared for such outbreaks due to unusually hot weather. Drought and blistering heat have been turning forests into tinderboxes in places that were previously fire-free. You need a number of ingredients for wildfires in particular, and climate change is one of them. Let's tally events so far this year. Sweden has experienced 65 fires already this year, up from an annual average of 3 fires over the past decade. Blazes are now happening as far north as the Arctic Circle. That's according to Copernicus, the European Union's Earth observation programme. At least 91 people died last month in the worst wildfire to hit Greece in decades. Fire raced through a seaside area northeast of Athens. And in the US, the annual average number of large fires has doubled since the 1970s, putting lives and livelihoods at risk. GABRIEL Elizondo has more from the destroyed town of KESWICK.
The entire community of Keswick, California, has been turned to ash. Nothing remains. A once lively little town of about 700 people now resembles something like a faraway planet from a science fiction movie. The fire that roared through here was described as a tornado of flames. There was nothing firefighters could do to stop it.
The way that fire front was coming through, it was going to do what it wanted to do. We might be able to save one little spot here, but the risk would have been just immense to try and even be anywhere near there.
What remains are the remnants of people's lives. There are small signs of life here, like the burnt pages of this children's book. It's silent. There isn't a sound. There is still a mandatory evacuation zone. Residents aren't being allowed back. Only the occasional emergency vehicle passes by. Ironically, the only color remaining in town, a red fire hydrant that was no match for the flames.
It's the middle of the day, but the sun can barely be seen because it's so gray and dark here. The sun can barely peek out through the thick layer of smoke and ash that covers the air, not only here, but in this entire region of California. Doctors say people that inhale this smoke now face health risks.
By all accounts, everyone here was able to flee just before the fire overtook them. The residents are mostly low income. The future of the historic town is now in doubt.
I don't know if they'll have the resources to rebuild. Hopefully those who have insurance have the opportunity, but those who don't, it's a low-income type of area, so I'm not sure that a lot of people will be able to rebuild.
If they decide to rebuild, it will be a new town because the old one simply no longer exists.
Well, joining us now from London is Sam FANKHAUSER. Sam is the director of the GRANTHAM Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment. Good to have you with us. So first of all, how unusual are the extreme heat events we've been witnessing this year?
Well, at the moment, these events still feel slightly unusual. We sort of talk about record temperatures, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere. But if we start looking forward and factor in climate change, this will become the new normal. There are predictions that the kind of heat we have this year, we might experience every other year from about 2040 onwards.
That's quite scary. You mentioned climate change there. How is it linked to climate change? Break it down for us.
Well, there's quite a clear link between the probability of having a heat wave and climate change. The climate or the weather sort of fluctuates, but you add a stock of temperature on top of that fluctuations, and we are about 1 degree warmer now on global average than we were in pre-industrial times, 100, 200 years ago. And that means that we can statistically start to show that the probability of certain events increases because of climate change. What we're currently seeing in Northern Europe, preliminary estimates tell us, is about 2 times as likely than it would have been if there wasn't man-made global warming.
What sort of heat events should we expect to occur every other year going forward? More of the same or something even more a little intense?
It could probably even become more intense, and we shouldn't just talk about only heat and temperature. Climate change changes a lot of variables that can be dangerous to us. We will see more drought events, and that can be really, really disruptive. We can look at Southern Africa, the Cape region at the moment, where water is in very, very short supply, and that causes huge disruption and damage. We might have too much water in other instances, extreme downpours, flooding events, hurricanes, typhoons. We've seen examples of that in the US a year ago with hurricanes like Maria and Harvey. We see it in Japan at the moment. Again, there are very high damages associated with too much water, as much as damage from not enough water.
So
then, of course, you have the heat waves.
So just listening to you speak there, one assumes this will be very disruptive to current patterns of economic activity, right?
It will be very disruptive. We can adapt to certain things. We can change our agricultural practices. We can plant different crops. We can air condition our houses. So it's a lot of things we can do, but it will ultimately be very disruptive. We will have to change our infrastructure, the way we do things. Infrastructure is very long-lived. Buildings, cities, trains, power stations, they live for 20, 30, 40 years. If you have to redesign and retrofit climate change adaptation onto those structures, that will be very disruptive and very expensive. It will be worth doing because we have a different climate, but it will be very, very expensive.
It's been fascinating talking to you. Thanks so much, Sam.
My pleasure.